In this video, I focus on just one of the visual devices used by Garry Winogrand during his 30 years of photography. Throughout his career, he produced images that were astute and often hard-hitting commentaries on the human condition. He would often use the juxtaposition of elements within his frames to startle, amuse, and confound viewers. He sought out these complex relationships between his subjects that ranged from the explicit to the subtly multidimensional. Winogrand was actively shooting from the mid-50s to the mid-80s. His approach was just to continue shooting until he found a chance image or he felt he achieved his image. So when he died in 1984, his archive consisted of well over 1 million images, and a third of these were in the form of undeveloped rolls of film. He grew up in the then predominantly Jewish working-class area of the Bronx in New York, where his father was a leather worker. Coming from a poor background, he was very aware of the social inequalities within America. His major influences were Walker Evans and Robert Frank. He was described as a street photographer, but he was never happy with that label. John Sikowski, the director of photography at the New York Museum of Modern Art, called Winogrand the central photographer of his generation, and I personally place him in my top 5 photographers of all time. Within the literary world, I'd probably compare Winogrand with the poet and writer Charles Bukowski. He was a tough, uncompromising photographer who despised pretension and refused to conform. Getting back to the subject of juxtaposition, I'll start off by a few images that are really simple in their construction. Here you've got a horizontal line and a vertical line giving you all the detail you need to read the photograph. The woman's face here and the facade showing a woman's face directly below. Both of the eye lines are facing in this direction. So immediately the viewer's brain will pick up the repetition of the woman's face. So it'll provide a really orderly understanding of the photograph. This New York image is also full of repetition. First of all, it's divided almost down the middle. You've got a car repeated on the left, car repeated on the right, 2 children, 2 adults. The pairing of hands, the woman hailing a taxi, but then you've got this little guy down here with his hands clapping on his own. So he always adds a little humorous touch or a little oddity to his photographs. It also lands up being a commentary on aging, loss of innocence. You have the young girls here completely involved in their play, while the mothers are focused on getting things done, getting a taxi to go home or to move somewhere else. And then this child, who we can't see completely, but he's in his own world. Winogrand was known for his loose approach to taking photographs, but he had a real formality with his eye. Horizontal, vertical, you've got probably a seal's flippers, and then the bird flying in the top left-hand corner. So you have these shapes repeated, and what it does is throw the whole formality of the composition into a randomness, but the brain can immediately find order again by seeing those 2 shapes, and then one explores the photograph further. So there's a continual shifting between formality and chaos, and that's where the depth of creativity creeps in. You've got layers of visual tension that compete with each other, but also complement each other. This photograph is just so obviously politically incorrect. You've got the obvious repetition of the lady's boobs down here, but then you've got this lecherous guy staring straight across, and then this guy looking down doing the same. So even though the woman is the central figure in the photograph, he's put her on the far left so that he can include the lecherous men as well as the 2 women looking on. So here again, it's an incredibly complex composition with lots of humor, but also a commentary on sexual interaction between males and females. This photograph again is sexually charged. You've got a wolf here mirrors the lustful way that this young man is looking at his partner. There's a sense that he's circling his prey, and she has quite defensive body language with her folded arms and her folded legs. The next few images come from Winogrand's Stock Photographs book. It's such a simple composition, but it's such a disturbing image at the same time. The figure of the sheep and the overweight boy in the foreground are slightly out of focus, which adds to the blandness of both the faces. The blandness of his overweight face is mirrored by the lack of texture within the sheep's face. The boy and the sheep look isolated and lonely within this environment. On the surface, this is just a photograph of a woman and a prize bull, but it's actually all about eyes. This penetrating and slightly unnerving look from the bull is in contrast to these almost doe eyes of the young girl. And then you have this chap right in the center of the frame staring directly at the photographer. So a simple photograph is turned into a really complex play between the eyes of all three figures within the photograph. This image is a complex composition which holds the elements within the frame in a delicate but perfect balance. It's an image that you would expect from maybe Bill Brand or Harry Callahan. The humor of the hat floating above the man on the left is offset by the serious and concerned look on the man's face. These three circles within the frame are set up in a perfect triangle, which is accentuated by the look of the man on the left, pointing up to the man on the right. With these and so many more of his images, you can see that his brain is making fast connections all the time. Pattern recognition is the ability to see order in a chaotic environment. This type of pattern recognition intelligence is said to have the highest correlation with the general intelligence factor G, which basically correlates with IQ or cognitive ability. I know the term genius is thrown around far too liberally, but perhaps in Winogrand's case it might be apt. I could have chosen to talk about any number of photographs that he produced, but because his work is such a complex subject, I'd rather return to him in bite-sized chunks along the way. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, and please listen next time. Thanks.
Is it over yet?
Yes, it is good. It really is.
What are they?
Well...
and find out what the future holds in store.
Is it over yet?